Good morning. If people can take their seats, we'll get underway and try to stay at least roughly on schedule. Wow. I wish my kids, when they lived with me, were as receptive to my requests. But anyways, good morning. It's great to see all of you. Thank you for being here. I'm Ron Flagg, President of the Legal Services Corporation. I suppose, having said that, I can take this name tag off. I want to welcome all of you to LSC's 25th Innovations in Technology Conference. That said, automatically, this is the 25th time we have convened this conference, bringing together technology experts, legal aid advocates, court personnel, pro bono coordinators, and other experts and professionals at what has become the country's largest event dedicated to expanding access to civil justice through technological innovation. I want to thank our many speakers and panelists. I want to thank, in particular, Legal Server, the ITC 25 presenting sponsor, and the many other exhibitors and sponsors whose tables are right outside the doors of this ballroom. My profound gratitude always to my LSC colleagues, but particularly in connection with this event, the members of our technology team who worked with our event staff to pull this conference together. A special salute to my longtime friend and colleague, Glenn Rawdon, sitting in the fourth row here, who retired as Senior Program Counsel at LSC this past October after 25 highly impactful years at LSC, and that was after his prior long career in civil legal aid in Oklahoma. So thank you, Glenn. In 2000, Glenn launched both the Technology Initiative Grant Program and this conference. And thanks to the foundation he laid, LSC has awarded over 900 technology grants over the past 25 years, totaling more than $91 million. That is a lot of innovations, and it has fundamentally transformed how legal aid organizations leverage technology to serve clients. And I think during the pandemic, we really saw many of those developments come to fruition, not just for programs in remote places trying to reach people in distant areas of their service areas, but for those of us in cities who couldn't for a long time see our clients face to face. LSC's expanded technology team is poised to build on this foundation. Jane Ribadiniera, Angela Tripp, LaDeirdre Johnson, MJ Smith, Eric Matheson, and Selena Hahn are committed to supporting LSC's vision for a reimagined TIG program that will meet this critical moment, including a focus on strategic funding, modernized grant oversight, and technical assistance, and importantly, peer learning to help legal aid organizations harness technology's potential to expand access to justice. As part of this vision, I am excited to announce this morning that LSC will launch its first AI Learning Lab just a couple months from now. This initiative will create a collaborative space for legal service providers to explore AI applications in legal aid, exchange implementation strategies, and develop shared best practices as this technology evolves. We all know, even, not that I'm going to speak for that long, but by the end of my remarks, AI will have advanced markedly, and the only way for all of us to keep up with it and build on it is to collaborate, and that's what our AI Learning Lab will do. Now, you'll hear more details about this exciting initiative from my technology team colleagues throughout the conference and in more detail in the coming weeks. If you look around, there are more than 700 people registered for this conference, which features over 55 sessions and 150 speakers, a far cry from the 32 people who attended the first conference in 2000. So we're headed in the right direction. The growth of this conference mirrors the growth of the legal tech sector and the critical problem we hope it will address, the justice gap, the market gulf between the civil legal needs of low-income Americans and the all too few resources available to meet those needs. LSC's 2022 Justice Gap Survey examined the magnitude of this problem and captured the magnitude of the dire situation really in a single statistic. Low-income Americans did not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their significant civil legal problems. And when you consider that the study also found that 74% of low-income households experience at least one civil legal problem a year, and 39% whether 5 or more, we can all understand the magnitude of the challenge. Now, the term justice gap, as fond as I am of it, is really a pretty abstract metaphor. But those caught in the justice gap suffer very real consequences, and those are consequences which I know all of you work every day, and they range from losing their homes, their jobs, their livelihoods, and even at times their children. This enormous and stubbornly persistent problem requires innovation commensurate with the enormous threat it poses. We need innovations that will move the needle. Fortunately, today, we are at a moment where there are two areas of innovation with enormous potential to actually move the needle. The first and most pertinent to this conference is, of course, the use of artificial intelligence, and we're all familiar with the various ethical, regulatory, and performance issues that still are being worked on. But even with those, AI promises to be transformative for legal aid providers. As Paladin co-founder and CEO Kristen Sande recently observed, and I quote Kristen, "It is hard to overstate the impact that artificial intelligence is expected to have on helping low-income individuals achieve better access to justice. And for those legal services organizations that serve on the front lines, too often without sufficient funding, staff, or technology, AI presents perhaps their best opportunity to close the justice gap. With the ability of AI-driven tools to streamline agency operations, minimize administrative work, more effectively reallocate talent, and allow legal services organizations to more effectively service clients, the implementation of these tools is essential." Now, yesterday, Kristen joined LSC to co-host a 5-hour event, the AI Summit for Legal Aid, and I know about half of you in the room joined us. And the summit explored the transformative potential of AI in legal aid, presented real-world case studies that demonstrate the impact of AI applications. That was, for me, the highlight of the day. We saw probably a dozen applications rolled out in real time, and they were jaw-dropping. And we even had the opportunity for hands-on training to improve our prompt engineering and build our own GPTs. So AI is very much on the agenda here at the ITC. There's a lot of other programs as well, but within the AI space, We have more than a dozen programs exploring how legal service providers can integrate AI tools into their services or internal procedures. Topics include how AI-powered documentation automation is revolutionizing the expungement process. We saw a couple examples of that yesterday. They were amazing. And how to develop sophisticated chatbots to guide users. And the intriguingly entitled AI for Legal Aid, Everything You Were Afraid to Ask and Should Know. The second area of innovation with enormous potential for helping narrow the justice gap is the growing use of community justice workers to provide legal services. Last month, this state, Arizona, initiated the Legal Services Authorized Community Justice Worker Program, which will allow people with limited training to legally provide advice to clients on discrete issues, consumer issues, debt relief, public benefits, and landlord-tenant disputes. Similar programs exist in Alaska, Utah, and Delaware, and there are signs that other states may be on track to implement similar programs, including Washington State and Texas. Now, Nicole Nelson, who many of you know, was instrumental in establishing the Community Justice Worker Program in Alaska during her tenure as the Executive Director of Alaska Legal Services Corporation. She is now CEO of Frontline Justice, an initiative aimed at increasing the availability and capabilities of justice workers. Frontline Justice has a table at this conference, and I'm sure Nicole and her colleagues would be happy to talk to you about their work. During a recent episode of a podcast, LSC podcast, Talk Justice, Nicole said that her organization's mission is to try to make community justice workers possible nationwide. And she issued a call to action, which I think is apt today, to decisively address the justice gap. And I quote Nicole, "Let's get going. I mean, this crisis is on fire, right?" I can just hear Nicole. Nationally, 92% of people who have civil legal needs are not having them met. And I remember a time when it was 80%. The crisis is getting worse. The time for waiting has passed. Let's start experimenting. Let's start moving things forward that might actually address the justice gap. Let's start now. We hear you, Nicole. And over the next 3 days, we will be discussing tech innovations that can indeed move things forward and make meaningful progress in closing the justice gap. So I urge you all to go out and experiment. And I can't think of a better way to kick off our quest for impactful innovation than to hear from our keynote speaker, Afua Bruce, who I'm privileged now to introduce. Afua is a leading public interest technologist whose career spans government, nonprofit, private, and academic sectors. She is the author of The Tech That Comes Next: How Changemakers, Philanthropists, and Technologists Can Build an Equitable World. She currently is the principal of the A&B Advisory Group, a consulting firm that supports organizations in developing, implementing, and funding responsible data and technology solutions. Before founding A&B, Afua held senior science and technology roles at the White House, the FBI, and IBM. Afua was honored with a statue in the IT Then exhibit highlighting women in STEM, which was displayed on the National Mall in 2022. Afua holds a degree in computer engineering from Purdue and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Afua, we are so grateful to have you here. Please all join me in welcoming Afua Bruce, our keynote speaker.
We're just going to take a second to bring my slides up. Good morning. Okay, coffee's still kicking in. I'll give you guys a few more minutes. Good morning. Good morning. Wonderful, excellent. I'm so excited to be able to join you today. I have been familiar with this conference for a long time and haven't been able to attend in the past, but I'm excited to join you in this capacity. If your project succeeds, missions will fail. These words have haunted me and guided me throughout my career. I started my career off as a software engineer working in the private sector, but for the past decade and a half, I've been working on technology in public interest organizations, in government institutions, in nonprofits, working with community groups all around the world. And this particular quote comes from one of the first projects I worked on when I was at the FBI. I reported to the FBI's senior executive over the Criminal Investigative Division. This is the division that investigates bank robberies and white-collar crimes, kidnappings, gangs, your traditional FBI. And this project was designed to roll out a technology tool that would help improve communication and information sharing between FBI special agents and intelligence analysts. The project was designed to really update the technology that was used for this communication, and also to help, as my boss at the time would put it, really help take the division into the next decade. My boss gave me a couple of senior people to work closely with and introduced me to his executive team. I did interviews with all of the executive team, then I spoke to the intelligence analysts and special agents that they referred me to. And after a couple of months, I came up, I diagnosed what I had thought was the root cause of the problem. I presented a beautiful PowerPoint presentation to my boss about what to do next, and he loved it. So he did what a lot of executives do in this situation. He called a big meeting, called everyone in, and said, guys, I have the greatest idea. We are going to help improve the way we work. Afua has been talking to you, and we're going to get started. Isn't this great? And a lot of people in the room said, this is great. And I remember going back to my office. I'll admit, I was feeling pretty proud of myself for navigating the bureau in this way. And I'm just minding my own business at my desk when all of a sudden an agent just bursts into my office and says, if your project succeeds, missions will fail. If you've ever seen someone who is clearly very, very angry and worked up, but also trying to not show that they're very, very angry and worked up, and also failing at not showing that they are very, very angry and not working up, you can imagine what I was staring into at that moment. And I found myself looking at this armed federal agent telling me missions are going to fail because of my project, and I remember thinking, I should have stayed home today. And then I started to spiral. I was thinking, no, I have real skills. I could be working in the private sector making real money and not dealing with this right now at all. But she was standing between me and the door. I had no choice. So I just looked at her and I said, okay, come on in. Let's talk about it. And what I found in the next couple of weeks that we would work more closely together is that even though I had worked really hard on making sure the technology tool would work, I had worked to get input from a couple of different people, I'd missed the boat in some key elements of developing and deploying technology that actually would have made a difference in the way that people adopted the tool, therefore used it, and actually could share the information and accomplish the missions. And so I want you all to be thinking about your own organizations and recognize that organizations need technology and innovation to go well. We're all in spaces, especially the mission-driven spaces, where people are barely keeping up with what's coming in. The political winds are changing. We have fires, natural disaster. We have wars around. People have lives that they're living. They are tired, and we need to figure out how can we serve more people? How can we serve our clients better? How can we make sure that our organization can do more with the limited resources that we have? Technology can be a powerful tool in making this happen, but it has to go well. There was a 2020 study done by McKinsey, or I think the report was released in 2020 by McKinsey, that showed that actually 17% of large IT projects not only fail, but threaten the existence of the company. And so that means that if you're not doing your technology projects well, it can not only affect your specific project, but it can affect the lives of the people who count on your organization to deliver. It can affect the lives of their families as well and their livelihood. So it is important that as we think about how can our organizations do more and how can our organizations do better, we also think about how are we managing these projects well. And I argue that there are 3 categories that you need to speak to, that you need to manage as you're rolling out any new tool in order to help this happen. The first is process. And I'll admit, I love a good process. I love a good process. If you ask my family about when we are going on vacation, they will tell you that months in advance, I create a spreadsheet. It often has at least 4 tabs to track ideas of things to do, where we're gonna go, who's going to do what we're going to be eating, what the optional restaurants are. There's multiple columns, of course, because my food has to be right during all of this time. And then just before the trip, I send it out with a nice, usually 2 or 3 paragraph email, also speaking to the weather, what you might wanna pack, and things like that. And then, of course, we get to the location and people ask, what are we doing? And I'm like, check the spreadsheet, check the spreadsheet. I sent it for a reason, read the email. But, I'm not saying that my family checks the spreadsheet or honestly even cares, but I still do it. And I would argue, though, that that's what you need to be doing in your organizations. You need to make sure that people know what to expect. People know how to get their jobs done, so then they can worry about, how do I innovate? How do I be creative? How can I actually move things forward in the organization? So you want to make sure your processes are clear and documented, and that you're actually following them. The other thing that is incredibly important when we talk about process is the change management process. Because often new technology tools aren't just there to update the technology. They're there to update how people communicate with each other. They're there to update how information is shared. They're there to update how people collaborate. They're there to update how the organization works. And so if you're only focusing on the technology change, as I had been in that FBI example I started with, you miss everything else that needs to be done. But going through a defined change management process can help you manage that much more clearly and effectively. So the first step is that you want to define a clear and real need for change. You are all smart people here. I trust that you think your coworkers are, for the most part, also smart. And so this means that they can tell if there's not a real need. They can tell that if the problem is a solution looking for a problem. And so in order to start your project and get people on board, you need to answer the question, why this change? Why now? Why changing in this way? The second thing that you want to do is form a diverse coalition. This can be directly your team that is responsible for executing, but it can also be a coalition of people that you talk throughout the process to make sure that you're staying on track. And the team should be diverse in many ways, but I think especially thinking about having different levels of management in the coalition that's formed. You should also have different job types represented. Because again, you need to be thinking not just about what the technology looks like, but who is going to interact with it. Who's getting information from it? Who is getting information that is gotten from the technology system? And what are even the overall organizational standards and values that are directing that? So the diverse coalition can help you form that. The third thing you want to do is create a collaborative strategic plan. Identify the timeline and the milestones that matter with this diverse team. This will help you to make sure that you are staying on track with not only the goal for your specific technology that you're rolling out, but also for everything else that's going on in your organization and what needs to be weighed against each other. The fourth step is you want to focus on the goal, not the titles, and by this I mean you want to make sure that you are driving to completion regardless of what that takes. At the FBI, I learned very quickly, for example, that there were some senior agents who would only take advice from other senior agents. I was not an agent. And so that meant that I had to go back to members of my diverse coalition sometimes and say, hey, you need to go have whatever this agent-to-agent conversation is, and figure it out, get this person on board, get this information here. I couldn't be focused on the fact that my title was project lead, my title was program executive. I needed to get the job done. The fifth thing you want to do with technology projects is make sure that you build on short-term wins. Technology projects can be long, they can be winding, they can go backwards at times, but finding wins, figuring out ways to communicate those out and celebrate those wins, to mark and celebrate those wins, can help build momentum and continued support for your project. You also want to be honest about the reality. If the technology is taking away, if the new tool is taking away some feature or some aspect that people really like, tell them up front. Don't surprise them by saying, I have a great tool for you. And then they end up not using it because they can't do any of the things that they wanted to do and you didn't give them a good mitigation plan. The last step here that's really important is to use bureaucracy for good. Every organization has bureaucracy at some point. I've worked with the federal government for years. I'm familiar with what bureaucracy looks like. But people often push back on it, but I want you to think of bureaucracy as an opportunity to make sure your project has long-lasting success. Because the trick about bureaucracy is that even if you innovate outside of the normal process, even if you innovate outside of the bureaucracy, if you put your process and your tool back into the bureaucracy, it will continue on and on and on forever. I saw this repeatedly when I was at the White House, and we would send a rapid response tech team to an agency to help out. The tech team would figure out what was wrong. They were working with some civil servants there. They'd make the change, and some tech teams would then just move on. In those cases, as soon as the executive who stayed behind moved on, as soon as the people who stayed behind found new jobs or moved out of government, the project sort of slowly fizzled away. And so if you don't want your tool to fizzle away, you need to make sure that you're injecting it back into the bureaucracy so that it can continue. And of course, throughout this whole change management process, you want to be communicating. People will make up the truth when you don't tell them what the truth is. So we've talked about process, and I want to briefly talk about people. Because people are the most important and the strongest asset your organization has. Your staff, your volunteers, if you have them, even your clients, they count as part of the organization. Your organizations are, at their core, human-centered. That's why you got into this line of work. That's why you're in this profession. And so you need to make sure that you are empowering the people in your organization to do work. And when it comes to the specific technology tools that you may be thinking about, you need to make sure you are intentional about what that means in hiring and especially training new employees, new staff, new volunteers, and more. Because you think about us as humans, we start as babies, we have to be taught how to talk and walk and engage in the world. How much more so for the different technology tools? But I think so often we say that, oh, we finished this project. We did a training at the start. It now should be intuitive. People should adopt it now. That's not the reality. So you want to make sure you're investing the time to train staff on how to use it. Maybe at the rollout, check in at another 3 months to make sure that it's still going well. You want to make sure you're looking at your clients and making sure that they understand how to use any new tech tools to get information from you and to give you new information as well. So you want to make sure that you're caring for the people because they're the engine of your organization, and that's what you need to move forward. So we've talked about process, we've talked about people, and now I want to talk about the technology itself. As I was preparing for this talk, I thought, how can I make technology interesting to people who already think about technology? And I said, I can tell a joke. And my sister said, no, you can't. So I said, ChatGPT, tell me a joke about technology and the legal profession. Oh, I could tell a joke. Oh, look at me. Okay, why don't lawyers trust AI assistants? I'm glad you asked. Because every time they ask for legal precedent, the AI replies, it depends. Got some groans there. I told ChatGPT that wasn't funny. Tell me another joke. And because I know something about prompt engineering and that the more you give to generative AI, the more generative AI gives to you, I also said I'm going to a legal services corporation conference. I'm talking about technology. There will be people in different positions there. Tell me a joke that will be funny that I can use in my talk. And ChatGPT said, why did the legal team name their document management system Justice? Because they wanted to make sure it was blind to user error. Okay, we got some more. I don't know if those are real laughs, but I appreciate them. ChatGPT appreciates them. But I also use that to just emphasize that if anyone tells you AI is really here already to take all your jobs, have ChatGPT tell you a joke and you'll move on. But it's also important, I think, to recognize, though, that this moment of AI, for all of the push and focus on AI, as I know is at this conference, to also see that this is a moment to use to double down on the basics of technology. Just as in those semi-funny jokes, we probably should have spent more time figuring out, using a human who's actually funny to write those jokes. When we think about our technology in this moment of AI, we need to make sure that our data systems are strong. We need to make sure people actually have access to the technology tools they need, whether it's a computer, whether it's high-speed internet, or whatever else. So use this moment of AI to really push on the fundamentals. Because also, if you don't get those fundamentals of technology right, you're never going to be able to adopt AI as well, anyway. You also want to make sure that you're selecting the right project for the right team. And so in that, you want to make sure that the tool will actually be able to be used in your organization, in your team. If your team doesn't have data that's somewhere in a technology system that can be accessed, not we have data, but it's behind something because someone who is at our organization still has the password and we have to call them every so often. If you don't have that, if you don't have people who can actually access the systems, right, then some AI tools aren't going to be for you. But you can also have other organizations that are ready to go and ready to even have custom AI tools built and maintained in their organization. So make sure you're putting in the work to select the right technology for the project, for the team, and for the organization. Now, I know obviously AI is the topic of the day. I actually used to lead a nonprofit organization that did data science and AI for mission-driven organizations around the world. So I've been in the AI space now for about 5 or 6 years. And what I found is that many people want to focus on the specific technology. Should we be using Gemini or Copilot? Should we look at this application or that application? I'm not going to get into those discussions today because you have many sessions that are showing you specific applications. But I do have here some basic starts for your organization to think about when it comes to governance. Because even before you start to select specific tools, you should know what are the guardrails, what's in the realm of acceptable for your organization. This framework that I have here, this is the first page of questions in a fairly short framework I developed with Microsoft last year, helps mission-driven organizations say, what are our guiding principles, and then go successively through how does that imply and what are the implications for our data governance, our IT policies, and more. So I suggest you work on creating AI governance policies for your organizations, and this is one way to do that. So I've now talked about process, I've talked about people, and then I've talked about the technology itself. You will hear people from time to time say, well, it's not just about the technology, it's about the people. Or it's not about the people, it's just about the technology. If we have the right technology, if we have the right AI, it'll fix all of our people issues. Or sometimes people will say, if we just have good processes, we can slot in the right people, we can slot in the right technology. And to those people, I would say, no, no, and no. It is about the process, it is about the people, and it is about the technology. You really do need to manage all three together. And if you do that, you'll be able to make it so that if your project succeeds, missions will also succeed. The work of advancing technology in organizations and using technology, in this case to help increase access to justice, is long. Individual projects take a long time, technology is always changing, our environment is always changing, so the work is always changing. You have to recognize this is a marathon and not a sprint. But at the same time, in 2025, with how much information is digital, how many digital systems govern people's lives, we also have to recognize that caring about people is caring about the technology and data that they interact with. And so as you do your job, recognize it is critical to giving people the ability to access justice. It is critical to giving people the ability to live dignified lives. And so that is why it's so important to manage to the people, the process, and the technology. I want to leave you with this quote that comes from the book, The Tech That Comes Next, that I wrote with Amy Sample Ward, who's another nonprofit technology expert. It says, the world we have today is filled with challenges. There are hardships and injustices everywhere we look. It's because of this that we know that, together, we must commit to something else. Today, this moment, right now, is the right time for us to take the next step. What will you build next? The work you are doing is critical to helping people access justice. You need to do it in ways that are responsible, in ways that truly make it so that you won't be one of those 17 projects that not only fail, but threaten the organizations, but you'll do it in ways that truly do help increase access to justice. So again, I ask, what will you build next? Thank you so much. And I'm told we have a couple of minutes for questions. I think I went a little longer. Okay, we have a couple of minutes for questions. So if anyone has questions, please. Are there mics or? Sorry, these logistics we did not think through. Wonderful. Oh, man. It's great. I was like, coffee is still kicking in. I think there's one question here. We can go to you first. Or,
If we're embarking on a new project, what standards do we use? If we're embarking on a new project and we've got our process and our people in place, given how fast things are changing and developing, how do we make a judgment about what will work, where we should look for technology, and, what standards are there to evaluate how well existing technology solutions are working?
absolutely. Thanks for the question. When you say technology, are you talking specifically AI or any other technology? Either. Oh, very open-ended question. Okay. So I think a couple of things. So as you're starting and you're saying, what should we be doing? I think going to trusted spaces like the LSC, like an N10, like other spaces who have similarly minded folks with similar missions to see what is there, see what folks are vetting, see who has actually developed technology in strong partnership with communities who are actually doing work. I think looking to tools that have been developed without deep input from a legal services community, from a nonprofit leadership community, I think it's more challenging to ensure that those tools do actually help serve people and not harm people. So I'd start with sort of trusted spaces like this and see what types of tools people are using. I think there was another question here.
This is a people-related question. So you talked about building a diverse team, and I was wondering, within, for example, a highly hierarchical organization, how do you kind of manage the power dynamics to get people from all levels in that organization?
Yeah, so the question around managing people from all levels of an organization to contribute, to give their ideas when you have a very hierarchical organization. And so I think there are a couple of techniques that you can use here. One is by having a lot of individual conversations. So all that you can bring people together as a team and say we're a team, invest the time to have one-on-one conversations with people. And so that way some of your more junior staff, some of your more lower ranked staff may feel more comfortable confiding in you in that way or sharing with you in that way. And then when you present back at your team meetings, you can say, here's the consolidated feedback I've learned, and do that without highlighting any specific person. You can also then, in the meetings, call on different people, usually if you've coordinated with them in advance, to let them know that they'll be called on can be helpful. And do that for people at different levels of the organization, so both your more junior and your more senior leaders sharing in the meetings, and you taking extra care to amplify the work of especially the more junior junior employees. I think there was,
we have a question in the app. Can you elaborate on how to leverage bureaucracy for good?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one example that I go back to is from my time at the FBI. We had a policy management system where all official internal policies were kept. It took a lot of effort to get anything into that system. And so it really was just our bare bones. Well, there's a lot of them, but technically bare bones of what policies were governing our internal operations. And so what I would do is work with people after developing a new process, after developing a new tool, to actually then create that internal process documentation and put it back into the internal policy system. And usually that would take another at least 3 months, sometimes 6 months, after the project is done, after people are already using it, in order to update the internal policy system. But then it meant for years afterwards, for better or for worse sometimes, people would go back to what was in that internal policy system. So think about what systems you have that are the systems of record. Think about maybe advisory boards as well, and external accountability boards that could be brought in on the change in order to reinforce. Those are the different types of bureaucracy you want to be thinking about using for good. And I think we had one hand. Yes, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 rows back, maybe.
Josh from Legal Aid of Southeastern PA. You talked about making a career change from software engineering over to public sector legal services.
Yeah.
I'm making a similar one now, 2 months into public sector legal services coming from AI engineering. What helps you with that transition and helped you become successful in a new field like law?
Yeah, so when making a career change, especially from private sector to legal services sector to a more mission-driven sector, I think the things that are most important are knowing what your expertise is, really being an expert in what that is. It sounds like it's AI engineering, really understanding that that technical understanding is what you bring to the table. And that also means that there's a lot of other things that you need to learn. And so being really upfront and honest with people that you are there to learn about everything else, that you are there to create effective partnerships are there, and you're not there to replace other people's skills. I have gone from IBM to the FBI to the White House to a think tank to a nonprofit to adjunct professor as well at a university. And one of the ways I do that is by saying, this is my box. I will partner with people to build out something because that's what will make us stronger and deliver the same. But also, I'm not here to try and rewrite someone else's job necessarily. I'm not here to try and rewrite someone else's long tenure and a lot of lived experience and expertise. But we are here to partner because what we care about is the mission. What we care about is serving people. So let's figure out ways to partner effectively. So focusing on partnerships, I think, is what I'd recommend.
Another question from the app, this one from Margaret Hagan. Beyond your own team, what can organizations do to collaborate on tech nationally?
So what types of organizations collaborate on tech nationally beyond my own team? So there are a number of different tech coalitions. There's, in really sort of all fields. You have a whole host of civil society tech organizations coordinated by places like the Leadership Conference and Data and Society that work hard to bring representatives from civil rights organizations, representatives from legal organizations together to understand what are the different technologies that are out there, but also what are the threats from technologies, and also what are some of the good technologies that can be used to do jobs more effectively and bring and increase access to justice. There are also a number of nonprofit coalitions for humanitarian, for international aid, for health services, for disaster response, and more. And you'll find different pockets sort of coalescing in different spaces. Organizations like N10 and others tend to draw leaders from a lot of these different spaces and pull them together. And so you'll see that as well. But I search for really the issue that you care most about, legal services and justice and technology, and you'll find a host of coalitions that are actively working to create better systems for all of us. I should also say also with the lights, I can't see best the second row, but it's fine.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question from the app. How do you reckon with the environmental impact of AI, given that the struggle for civil legal justice is not in a vacuum, but is also tied up with environmental justice?
Yeah, this is a really big concern. The environmental impact of AI, by some reports, a single generative AI search takes several ounces of water to run. And so when you look at, you compound that over the number of Gen AI searches that we're all doing, the number of Gen AI searches that are being done because new tools are being developed, the impact on water supplies especially, but also environmental quality is not great, to say the least. This is compounding what we've already known about access to data centers and where data centers tend to be placed and the demands that data centers take on water systems. For me personally, how I stand on this is I think intentionally about when to use Gen AI and when not to use it. I think it's great for some cases, and I will use it for those. I think it is less great cases for other. I'm intentional about when I think to use it. Another thing is to continue to be part of different coalitions that are advocating for improved access and improved regulations and accounting for the environmental impact. I think that's important. I think we've seen some progress in general ESG guidelines for technology broadly, for carbon impact broadly. I hope that in the next couple of years we'll see something similar for environmental impact for AI systems as well.
What can an org do to get org leaders to buy into innovations? While we have some staff who are tech forward, we also have some leadership staff who are very change averse. Do you have any tips for bringing those leadership staff along?
Yeah. Sorry, this is giving me a little PTSD from some places that that I have worked. The same agent that I referred to, the one who said, you know, if your project succeeds, missions fail. We were working on, actually, we weren't even working on a project together, and I was sitting at her office, and I mentioned that a meeting time had changed, and she was like, oh, I think I have it. And she pulls out a binder that she took with her to every meeting, and she's like flipping the pages. And I was like, you're sitting at your computer, just look at your calendar. And her response was, wait, my meeting invites are also on my calendar? Every time she got a meeting invite as an executive, she would have her assistant print it out and put it in the 3-hole punch and then put it in her binder. And that was how she managed her schedule. So honestly, I should have anticipated that she wouldn't have been on board with my tech tool transfer. And so I say that is, you know, in that conversation, I remember sitting her in her office and I said, do you want me to show you how you can bring up your calendar? And she's like, yeah. So I showed her. She's like, this is so cool. And then a week later, she saw me in the hall and she's like, Afua, can you show me that trick again? I was like, bringing up your calendar? And I was like, sure, happy to. And went to her office and did the same thing, despite the fact that I was fairly senior ranked in the FBI. They're showing people how to use a calendar. But I say that because I think that in bringing people on board sometimes when they're reticent, it is about being honest about what the technology can and can't do. It is also a lot about saying, like, let me answer the silly questions that you feel like you should know the answer to, but you haven't been asking. You're carrying around a binder because you haven't been asking. I'm gonna sit with you patiently. We listen, we do not judge. I'm gonna walk you through those steps. I'm going to be available for help along the way with the basic things. So I wish there was a shortcut to that, but I found that to be the most effective way.
And I think we have time for one more question.
I think there's also a hand right here. Oh, there's a hand here and a hand there.
Okay.
So you
we'll
can
do
pick.
3 more questions,
Okay.
and then we're done.
Okay,
So
sure.
first, I'm just going to read this one from the app. Is there a best practice for bringing in community stakeholders to contribute to the development and testing process?
Yes, there are several best practices actually for bringing in community stakeholders to contribute to the development process. I think the first is to start early. In the tech that comes next, we do a case study into an organization providing food access to tackling food insecurity in a specific neighborhood in New York City. They started off on a very human scale, saying, these restaurants have extra food. We got people picking them up, biking them over, walking it over to people who we know are facing food insecurity. And they then wanted to develop a technology tool to help scale the organization, really, and to just help that process be more efficiently. So they didn't just turn to the tech person, who frankly at that time was someone else who did tech as part of their job in their organization, but they put different people in the organization on their team. They also put volunteers on their team, some restaurant representatives on their team, and some people who were the recipient of food, and said, let's start at the very start, before we do any design, to ask you what you actually need, how you would actually use this. And they kept those conversations ongoing throughout the project. They also created a feature list that everyone could see. And then everyone could see what was in scope and what was out of scope. And if something moved out of scope or something had been suggested and wasn't being moved into scope, the leaders of the project were upfront and transparent about what those changes were, why those were made, why things were in scope, why things were out of scope. And after a couple of years, this helps the organization not just operate effectively in that neighborhood, but they're actually now in 8 states across the country.
Is this me turn? Okay, hello, Eduardo Gonzalez, Afua, thanks for your comments. My question is maybe about the connecting to the networks and the coalitions who have these technology frameworks. how would you, or what would be your advice for us in the room who are the legal experts, the stakeholders that have the legal process, but maybe not the capacity to lead a project, and then we're partnering with a tech partner who's helping us? How can we be good participants or contributors to the design process when maybe we're not the ones designing and creating it?
Yeah, so the question is, if you are partnering, you're providing sort of that legal service expertise and insight to technologists who are developing the tool. Am I understanding that correctly? How you can be good partners. So I think there are a couple of ways. I think one, asking to see demos as frequently as possible and making sure they work. You are an expert for a reason. You know what's reasonable and not reasonable. It is easier to change any product closer to the start than at the end. And so if there are ways that you can ask for demos at the start, if there are ways that you can ask people to summarize what's being done at the start, that is the most effective way. I think you can also work a lot on some of the communication aspect and some of the building wins aspect. So by being in communication with the technologists who are developing it, helping them identify what wins are to communicate out to your organization. And so this helps in building that momentum, building sustained interest in your tool by saying, like, these are the wins that are actually going to matter to my community and to other people, and let's figure out what those are and figure out how to communicate those. So by seeing and weighing in on early demos and helping to communicate out a steady cadence of wins, provided they have wins. If they don't, maybe reevaluate the contract.
So we are unfortunately out of time for Q&A, but Afua has generously agreed to stick around after, so she will be available to answer any questions that folks still have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
By the giant red 25 outside the foyer. Please join me in thanking Afua for a tremendously impactful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, our second keynote speaker, Jane Ribadeneira, will speak to us about some housekeeping and other tips.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 25th TIG/ITC conference. It's great to see everybody here. As we said, Afua will be available. It's outside the foyer and here by the 25 if you want to ask some more questions and talk to her there. We also have kind of for presenters, people who are speaking, we have copies of Afua's book. They were a little delayed due to weather, but they should be here this afternoon, we're told. So please come by the check-in desk, the ITC registration check-in desk after 3 p.m. today or anytime tomorrow. And if you're speaking, we have a list and we have a copy of her book for you to pick up there. Just a few housekeeping announcements too. Always important, where are the bathrooms? There are a set of bathrooms through this door, and then also as you proceed towards the other breakout rooms around the corner here, there's a restroom. In the women's restroom, it looks like there's only about 6 stalls. If you keep walking, there's like a whole nother 20 stalls back there, so keep on going through there. The Wi-Fi password is in the app. Be sure you have the app downloaded. There will be lots of important notifications going around. Allow notifications from the app so that you see those notifications. If you don't see it, it's ITC, all caps, 2025 to get into the Marriott Bonvoy conference for the Wi-Fi. And then we do have our networking reception is this evening at the Arizona Science Center, which is just a short walk from the hotel, about 4 blocks. There's a walking map in the app. If you just go to the reception, it will take you to the app that's under the floor plans, or you can just Google it. And it starts at 6:30, goes until 8:30. There'll be food. There will be food and beverages throughout the museum, so as you go in, if there's a big crowd, keep walking, because there's some more food and beverages. Don't congregate all in the lobby, and there's some just fun exhibits that you can go through. We're also having a scavenger hunt challenge that there'll be a scavenger hunt game within the app, so it'll take you to different exhibits within the museum that you can go through. There will also be the gift store will be open in the museum, so if you need to get a gift for kids back home, that'll be a great opportunity to get something to take home with you. Also, the hotel needs everyone to exit very promptly, so please exit before you start talking to people, and because they need to close the air walls in here. There is a session in this middle section of the ballroom, so please go ahead and promptly exit so that they can prepare this room for our 10 o'clock sessions, which will get started promptly, and there will be coffee outside. So thank you, everyone. Have a good conference.